minutes left here. Thomas Meyer, Carson Cooney, both committed. And right, they just answer a question from Hawkeye Howard in the chat. He says, isn't Bud Meyer married to Kirk's daughter? No, that would be Tyler Barnes, the recruiting coordinator, is married to Kirk's daughter. John Budmeyer married a Hartlieb. So there is an Iowa connection there, but it's not through Kirk Ferentz. Anyways, Thomas Meyer, really good tight end out of Clear Lake. It's funny, I was just having a conversation with someone Sunday afternoon who's from Mason City. And I said, hey, when are we going to get an announcement from Thomas Meyer? Came down, I think, was it later the same day? Was that? Yeah, that was late Sunday that we got an announcement. So that was ironic. Boy, you look at him on tape, big kid. I talked about that yesterday on the show. He's listed, I think, at 6'5", 210. He almost looks bigger than he's listed as far as just girth. He's a really good basketball player. Seems to have really good hands, especially in traffic. They're going to be just loaded at tight end for the next several years because you have Addison Estringa, who has played a lot as an underclassman. First of all, you get Luke Lachey back this year. That's a huge plus. But then you get another year for Zach Ortworth, who played last year as a freshman. You get Grant Leaper another year. Who knows what the future is for Cale Vanderbush at that position. But then look at all these guys they're bringing in 24 and 25. You've got Thomas Meyer in 25. You got Michael Burt in 24. Gavin Hoffman in 24. There's a lot of talent coming in out of the high school ranks at that position for a position where Iowa already owns the national scene. You saw Travis Kelce make a comment in his Super Bowl press conference, I think it was today or yesterday, just about Iowa tight ends. And so when you have Travis Kelce mentioning it, bringing it up, I think that's a good indicator. There's a lot of respect nationally for what Iowa's doing at that position, not just with George Kittle, but with Sam Laporta, Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson. So anyways, very encouraged by linebacker and at tight end. Carson Cooney, really solid prospect out of Illinois. Iowa's done very well in the suburban Chicago area. Had a lot of other high major offers. And again, good size. I think he's listed at like 6'3", 6'4". I've said it about Phil Parker. I'll say it about Seth Wallace. You trust Seth Wallace evaluating people. He was the primary recruiter on Carson. I believe Jay Neiman was Thomas Meyer's primary recruiter. But they're going to be pretty stacked at both of those position groups for a while.
So what is the secret sauce at tight end? It's got to be a combination of scouting and development. It can't be either one because it's not like they rolled in the number one tight end in the country every year and therefore they just spit him out 3 years later to the NFL. No, they're developing a couple of highly ranked guys. Meyer's a top 10 guy, but still.
Yeah, I think if we're gonna blame Kirk Ferentz for certain things, I think you got to give him credit. He's been the common denominator, right? Like they've had good tight ends basically since he took over. And there were times where Brian Ferentz was coaching tight ends. There was, I think, a time when Reese Morgan was coaching tight ends. LeVar Woods coached tight ends. Now you have Abdul Hodge coaching tight ends. They seem to get very similar results regardless of who's coaching the tight ends. So what's the common denominator there, Mark? To me, I think it's the system. And you may say, well, you're really going to compliment the Iowa system? Well, when I say system, I'm talking culture, emphasis, as you mentioned, recruiting, being able to identify. I think you just got to give Kirk Ferentz a lot of credit. He and guys like Seth Wallace and Reese Morgan, even before, Brian Ferentz deserves some credit for that. But the common denominator in my mind is Kirk.
So I think sometimes we mix development and featuring that position. They haven't always featured the tight end to give them big numbers, but they have certainly developed them and prepared them to shine at the NFL level and to impress NFL scouts. And it's, except for probably George Kittle, it's not like these tight ends were under the radar at Iowa and then they just blossomed in the NFL. They were highly evaluated at Iowa, are high draft picks,
and then excel at the NFL level.
Yeah.
But for the record, one thing we got to remember is George Kittle really struggled with injuries at Iowa.
Yeah.
And I think he could have been so much better on paper He showed plenty of flashes in 2015 and 2016, but he dealt with injuries. Noah Fant was barely playing at the end of the 2017 season. That was kind of an odd, or 2018 season. That was kind of an odd situation. But he was a defensive end coming out of, I think, Omaha as a high schooler, developed into a really, really good tight end, and has not had the best NFL career of anybody, but he's been solid. He's not had very good offenses to work with, not very good quarterbacks or stable situations to deal with. He's got years left in the tank. But guys like TJ Hawkinson, I think was he Sheraton? I always forget which small town that starts with a C was the hometown of TJ Hawkinson, but not real highly thought of coming out of high school. Certainly Luke Lachey is another good example. I mean, he was a good recruit. His people knew about his dad and the Ohio State connection, but I mean, in general, they've just gotten prospects and developed them. Addison Estringa I remember having a discussion with Addison when he first signed on from Sun Prairie. And I'm like, you're ranked like 1200th in the country. How does that make you feel? Like, how do you deal with that? Cherokee. Thank you, Coil Stipulate. Cherokee, not Sheraton. Cherokee. And Addison Estringa played as a freshman. Who would have expected that? He was originally committed to Iowa as a baseball player. And then Sam Laporta, and you mentioned George Kittle. So many examples. Most of those guys were not highly thought of at Iowa or before Iowa got them into the system and developed them. And I said before, I think really highly of Michael Burt, Gavin Hoffman. I think really highly of Addison Estringa. I think really highly of Thomas Meyer. And I actually think really highly of Grant Leaper, too. The one guy I didn't think as highly of was Zach Ortworth, and he played as a true freshman last year. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to pretend.
Big catch against Wisconsin, right?
Huge catch.
Yep.
Huge catch.
And Iowa fans take some pride in this as well. And I think I've got a pretty good handle on this. Maybe not as good as I did at one point when I really was all over the NFL. But not only can Iowa claim to be tight end U, I don't think there's another position where you can make and attach a school to a position and just say, end of discussion. It's not a debate. There's a debate at every other position. But currently, looking at what's been produced in the last 10 to 15 years at Iowa, it's not a debate. It is all time, but in the last 10 or 15 years, and currently, it's not a discussion.
And there are other schools that have produced really good tight ends. Miami's one. Minnesota has
Notre
had
Dame.
Really good tight ends. Notre Dame. Iowa State's had really good tight ends. And by the way, as it relates to Thomas Meyer, a couple other offers on the list that are notable. Mizzou offered. Miami, Florida offered. I know Iowa State, Minnesota both offered. Again, good tight end schools. He's a 4-star kid, so this is a really good land. Again, I think, what did I say? Top 15 tight end nationally. And frankly, who cares? I mean, like you said, just that mantra, that label that Iowa's earned. It's like, how could you possibly doubt anything they're doing there? And it is an oddity. It is kind of an odd thing, but you got to give credit where credit is due. It gives me joy to be able to say, hey, Kirk Ferentz does it. And that I would have loved to have been able to ask, for the record, that I was only able to ask one question today to Kirk. I had my hand up the whole time for Tim Lester, didn't get called on. That's that. I know there's a lot of people involved with these media availabilities, so I appreciate the fact that we're given access. But I'd love to be able to get Kirk one-on-one, get Tim one-on-one, because there's a lot of great questions. That's being one, is what is the secret sauce at Iowa with all these different coaches, Kirk? How have you done this all these different years? Because I don't think he gets enough credit. Everybody loves to credit Iowa, but like, again, what's the common denominator? It's not like they're just drinking tight end water in Iowa City and all of a sudden they become prospects. So,
and again, just to underline it, it's not strictly recruiting like it is for other schools at other positions. And I'm not saying that they don't develop those positions, but it's a pretty obvious correlation between, okay, they get the best recruits at that position or at a number of positions. Boom, they're NFL players 3 years later. That's a pretty obvious correlation. Here it's fairly underregarded tight ends in a lot of cases being developed into not just tight ends that are sitting on rosters in the NFL, guys that are really good players and elite players.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I don't know the next time we're going to have availability with the coaches. I'm guessing that's going to be spring. I'm guessing because I don't think we're going to have. There's nothing for signing day. They're not signing anybody, Mark, for the official signing day. So um, I think the festivities today are what we're going to have until the start of spring practice, which is in about a month and a half away. The storyline to follow right now is what happens with LeVar Woods, and I'm reading on the Buccaneers website that apparently they let's see the Buccaneers. I think maybe Tom mentioned this, but they have let's see, at least 3 interviews have transpired for that job. I can tell you this, that if he leaves, there could very easily be people that are on scholarship at Iowa that enter the portal. Like, I'm just saying that right now. I mean, I don't know that Drew Stevens would enter the portal, but I wouldn't put it past him. Some of these kids, they're coming to kick for LeVar Woods, and fair enough. I mean, he's been phenomenal.
Yeah, it would be a huge loss, but at the same time, their stability in those two areas, defense and special teams, is pretty outstanding considering their success, because typically success breeds the double-edged sword is that you lose coaches and coordinators.
And maybe this does have something to do with the Seth promotion. You know, you don't know. I remember thinking that when the news first came out about Seth Wallace, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I mean, Seth. I'm not saying Seth's not deserving, but people have been talking about LeVar being the next head coach, and you're going to name Seth Wallace the assistant head coach and have him as a linebackers coach making more than one of your 3 coordinators. Now, granted, special teams coordinator is a different position than offensive and defensive coordinator. Okay, let's just make that totally clear. But as important as special teams is to Iowa, you know, who knows?
And I have no idea what the pay comparison is between the NFL and college football as a special teams coordinator.
And by the way, Coyle stipulate in the chat. Yeah, Lester did bring up meeting Reese Dakin the other day from Australia. Let's not forget, LeVar Woods went down there in December to go get Reese Dakin. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Guys are going to have to continue to recruit even if they have visions of leaving, but this seems to be somewhat of a pivot. I don't know. Seems to be somewhat of a pivot. He was going across the globe to get a recruit last month or a little over a month ago, and now he's interviewing for a job in a different part of the country. I don't know. He's also got his kid, by the way, I almost said Real Woods. He's a wrestler. His son, LeVar Woods' son, is playing at Iowa City West, and he's got another year in front of him, I believe. So, you know, what happens if he takes that job? Does he transfer out? I mean, I think a lot of people felt like LeVar would probably stick it out until at least his kid graduated high school, but who knows?
Join Corey every day at from the Hawkeye of the Storm, folks. You know where to find it. You should. From the Hawkeye of the Storm, men's and women's basketball and football, of course. When's the next basketball game, whether men's or women's?
Both of them play tomorrow. We're going to have probably a post-game show, a dual post-game show for both the men and the women. So they're actually back-to-back games. So one starts at 6, one starts at 8. So we'll have a fun post-game show at about 10 p.m. Central Time tomorrow night. Or excuse me, on Thursday night. I almost announced that wrong. Thursday night. Nothing tomorrow night, but Thursday night we'll have stuff coming out here on the show tomorrow. But it's going to be a busy month still, and we're almost to the finish line of the busy season, and then we head into a long off season with spring football and all that good stuff.
We are on our way to talk some Nebraska football. So Iowa fans, catch up on your rival. We will talk Nebraska football here in about a half hour or so. Make it 20 minutes over on the Nebraska channel, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central. Otherwise, make it on back here next Tuesday. Bring a friend or 2 or 50, and we will talk Hawkeyes football with all of you.